Welcome to this special edition covering one of our top stories today, Emmanuel Macron's state visit to Algeria. He's speaking now outside the Saint-Eugène cemetery. Let's take a listen.
Pick this up. This is a sensitive issue, and that's part of the issues that we discussed for a long time with the president. And we asked our ministers to look at it, and this has triggered tensions. This is an issue. If you're not careful, if you're not cautious, if you're not demanding, if you're not sensitive on both sides, it might trigger misunderstandings. We have the same will. We want a policy to fight clandestine immigration. On both sides, there are constraints. It's difficult to explain the French, the situation, that there's a lot of clandestine, illegal immigration, as you said, and then there's quite a few families who are on both sides and who are victims of those policies. So we decided to work together. We want to have a collective trust. We're not going to talk to the press, but I'm telling you now how we're going to do this. We're being very rigorous in fighting illegal immigration. We want to be more efficient to prevent and support more effectively this string of policies. We want to be more flexible on selected immigration. Artists, sportsmen, entrepreneurs who feed that bilateral relationship. So we're going to be shorter. You are right to point this out. If we simplify our procedures, we can have quicker visibility, and we don't want them to commit so much money and not be refunded. As we said yesterday, with the president, we discussed this and we mandated our ministers to work on this in the following weeks and months. Well, there were many more visas that were granted, say, 5 years ago. So my policy, which is a legitimate policy, is to revisit this issue and to work in a spirit of partnership with sensitivity. We want more cooperation to fight illegal immigration. We want to fight those that confuse the legal order and are seen as dangerous. And we want also to simplify procedures for people who build up that bilateral relationship. So we're going first to clarify our common approach to be more efficient in fighting illegal traffics and dangerous individuals. And we want to be more proactive for binational families and selected immigration, and youth in particular. Let me address your question. Did you tell the president that you want to import more gas? It is people have been talking a lot about this, and that's normal. As you know, France doesn't depend much on gas. It's not much of our mix, about 20%, though that's not much. And in gas, Algeria accounts for about 8 to 9%. So this is not the same situation as other countries where Algeria could change the gas situation. Italians have a gas pipeline between Italy and Algeria, but we're going to liquefy that gas. So that's not a major amount. And in the coming months, we're going to keep up the same action, to strengthen that action, and French and Algerian cooperation is not going to change the situation. It won't enable us to diversify because of the very structure of our relationship on this. I heard comments said, just anything. You have to look at the situation. It's not possible to go down this avenue. But I think it is a good thing to have more cooperation using the Italian gas pipeline. We're not going to have problems because we don't have a high gas dependency. We only have a single gas pipeline with Norway. We increased volumes. We are diversifying. We're building a new terminal to gain more liquefied gas in Le Havre. We secured our volumes, and we have about 90% of our stocks. So it is an issue of European solidarity. It is necessary. There are countries that depend a lot more on gas, and especially on Russian gas. We have to carry out a collective effort. So we want to be sober, we want to diversify our projects. So we're not competing with Italy. Is it a good thing for people to be thankful to Algeria, for Algeria to increase the volumes going through that gas pipeline with Italy? Because it's not full up yet. We can increase that capacity by about 50%. So it will increase to some extent this year. So that's a very good thing. It's good for Italy, so it's good for Europe, so it's good for us as well. Because we can improve the gas diversification for Europe. And so we'll be protecting ourselves from political hazards. We also want to strengthen the current partnership between our industries. Sonatrach as a partnership, it will be beefed up. It will be an industrial and research partnership. We're also going to strengthen economic partnerships on materials and rare earths. This is a huge political leverage between our two countries, and we're going to diversify innovation. This is the major potential that we have. I want to open with youth, and that's why I set up that fund during the two-side summit, and it will enable our entrepreneurs and our diasporas to carry through projects in Algeria. So we want to train the youth on those professions. We're going to set up a major incubator, a digital incubator, to develop those projects. In last September, you seem to have forgotten what you said in September. There's a love story, including a tragedy. You have to fight if you want to reconcile. Even before I became a president, I wanted to look our past in the eyes without being complacent. On the memorial issue between France and Algeria, we are always required to choose. Either you choose pride or repentance. What I want is truth and recognition. Otherwise, we won't make headway. I'm not a child of the Algerian War. Neither is my family. But I know one thing. France cannot make headway, cannot progress on this issue, and Algeria neither is. We're not making headway because we have a connected history, because the place of Algeria with the number of binationals, of Frenchmen of Algerian origin, there are millions of French people who are binationals who are involved. And then the repatriated persons and their descendants, that's a few more millions. Same here. We were in Algeria for over a century, so we have to be courageous in facing up to that history. We have to be lucid, look at the truth. That's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. I want to do this for France because it is the cradle of that memorial issue. Lots of things were done, achievements were made by historians and by politicians, as we never did before. What we did with the president yesterday is a progress, a historical progress. For the first time, together we said we are going to mandate a mixed historian committee, 5 or 6 historians on both sides. We're going to open all the archives. We opened archives that were closed up until now, and we're going to do that on both sides, from 1830 until the end of the war. So we'll give resources to that commission to work on this. The first period of colonization was very harsh, brutal. Those events that are critical for the Algerian nation, we have to review that up until the work that was done on disappeared people. So historians will have carte blanche to work on this, and then the first report will take place 1 year from now, and then there will be various steps, joint steps as we go along. It is a considerable progress to do that recognition work. If we don't want to keep doing the same mistakes. We've seen a lot of youth in the streets of Algiers. Do you have the feeling during that first day that you're making some headway? I also came with a lot of youth. And many of them, their families were involved in that history, and they need that. I also know that in our countries, for instance, the French cannot teach lessons. We have to recognize that during the last sessions of the National Assembly, an MP spoke of Algeria at the beginning of the session. We have to speak the truth. We cannot teach lessons. The example that France gave politically, we cannot say that everything went well. Also, there are many manipulations taking place on social media. Modern power imperialist nations are telling us what took place. But that's a very myopic manipulation of history. So you should not manipulate in return. You should be honest and say, this is our history, this is what took place, this is our debt. It stands on our shoulders. We should recognize that history so that we find our place. Our youth requires that. But that's not the end of the story. I don't want to be immersed, closed in that history. What I do know is that whenever you leave those folds of history stuck as they are, so to speak, you are facing a return of that buried sorrow. In order to live right after the war, you had to forget. It is the Spartan decree. That's what happened on both sides. And when there is a duty to forget, there's a buried sorrow. It is the return of that buried sorrow. So if we want to make headway, you have to change. You have those historical fantasies you have to deal with. So we should be able, our generation should be able to do that because we were not up to the task, because we were not involved. We have to say for ourselves, we must succeed that historical duty, truth and recognition. Opening archives. Some politicians in France say, oh, that's repentance again. This is not repentance. That recognition that there is no great nation without recognition. There's an everyday political duty, and then there is a noble sense of politics. We have to write a contemporary history, build a country. But that history cannot stand on lies, on forgetfulness. And we cannot confront opposed narratives Otherwise, we won't be able to have a friendship between the two countries. We don't want to build a narrative that does not recognize Algeria and vice versa. Because on this side of the Mediterranean as well, there was a narrative explaining the youth, your future is to keep up a fight in terms of hatred of France. That's not true. This youth never knew colonization or even the war. So, you see, we have to trust each other. We, in good faith, we committed to do this. And when you are in good faith, you commit to succeed, even though there might be different things on the way. And for the first time with the president, we are committed. And historians will do the rest. We have a friendly, trustful relationship. We spent a lot of time discussing. We, both of us, know that for our countries, we need to work in terms of lifting a dilemma. We have to spend a lot of work understanding each other, and that's what we did. It is a respectful relationship, a friendly relationship. What about the Sahel situation? What is your position now? And I want to speak about the presence of Wagner mercenaries. Well, the stance of Algeria will be spelled out by Algerians, but I believe that Algeria has a key role in the Sahel. And because of the agreements that were signed, it spells out a transition for Mali. So for that reason as well, I'd like to pay respect to French troops. I just paid my respect to those who died for France in the cemetery. So French troops fought against terrorism in Mali. That they had a goal of splitting Mali. Without the French troops, Mali would not be a country, and terrorism would have struck again. So I'd like to pay a tribute to the French army, who pulled out of Mali because we have a strategy with other Sahel and Guinea Gulf countries to support them in fighting those terrorist movements that weaken states and threaten the region and populations. So we want to strengthen our partnership with Algeria in this context. So we'll work together politically and diplomatically to support the follow-up of the Algiers agreements. And also, we want to convey the right message. We don't want mercenaries in this region, especially Wagner mercenaries. There are many hundreds of conscience prisoners in prisons. We spoke about that on this range of issues. I will not interfere in Algerian politics. I mentioned a number of cases. We had to make progress on those cases. And I told him my opinion in terms of transparency of political opinions. I know he believes that is important. I also know that he is going to work on this, and I respect what he will do. What about victims? We discussed this issue. It has been taken up by a joint committee. There were meetings in June, so we're making some headway. Over the last few years, I said, yes, we're going to indemnify, but each case has to be documented. And there's a historical individual work to be done. Algeria has not said whether you were an enemy or a friend of Great Britain. What did you say on this? Well, listen, I think we have to keep our bearings in life. Let me put it this way. If I was asked this question, whoever will be the leader of the UK, I have no doubts. The UK is France's friend. We live in a complicated world. Increasingly, there are liberals, authoritarian democracies, liberal democracies. The French and the Brits should be able to say whether they are friends or enemies. So if we can't say that, we're going to have serious problems. So let me say this. The British people, the British nation, the UK, is a friendly nation, a strong and allied country, whoever the leaders might be. And sometimes when they make some small mistakes, in spite of those leaders, on Ukraine, what about borrowed sorrows? What is your opinion on the Ukrainian war and Russia? It is up to Algerian authorities to take a stance. And I speak under the control of my your Algerian colleagues. The Algerian nation was built against colonialism and imperialism. The Ukrainian war is a war triggered by an imperial power that invaded the neighbor. So, accordingly, the Algerian nation can only be against that colonial war, that invasion, not respecting the integrity of the nation. We are concerned with nuclear security. That's why, since March, I am fully committed with the chairman of the IAEA to leave no stone unturned. As regards the Zaporizhia plant, I met the chairman of the IAEA. There were many contacts with President Zelensky, and I'll put it very simply. Two things. Under no circumstance should war threaten nuclear security of that nation, of that region. So that commission is going to meet very quickly. So we had security guarantees from Ukrainians and Russia. So that committee can be deployed and help protection. Second point, civil nuclear should be not turned into weapon. So there should be a supervision of that plant. Speaking of imperialism, do you think the African continent is moving away from France? For the last 5 years, I have initiated a policy with this continent and its youth. It is a new policy which I initiated in Ouagadougou, and we are trying to develop that policy. It takes time to take leave of the past, but I'm patient. I'm committed, and I have affection for the continent, for the African continent, especially for Algeria, because we are connected, because deep in our souls there's a connection and we can build this together. Yes, France was criticized because of its past, because we left misunderstandings, because also there's a huge amount of manipulation. Let's be clear. Many political Islam militants have an enemy, France. Some are supported by Turkey, Russia, and their agenda is a neo-colonial and imperialist agenda, and they have a single enemy, France. That's too easy. I want to tell the African youth, tell me what the problem is. Do not be manipulated. Your future is not to fight France. Maybe that was the case for your grandparents. But all of what you've been told are lies. If there are problems, let's face them together. This is not my generation, and I have a lot of love, freedom, and ambition to solve those problems. Let's make some headway. You mentioned sports. The last time that there was a confrontation between the two countries, the end was not very pretty. Do you want a soccer game between two countries? We'll take this up with the president and his teams. It will depend on competitions, how they turn out. Sports should reconcile people. Tomorrow in Iran, I'll be with our sportsmen in looking up to the Games, Olympic Games. We can finance projects, help youth to commit. As I mentioned, as I said about culture and sports, those are areas where we should be together. We may compete, but we will compete as friends. It would be a good thing. Over the next few days, will there be an agreement? I will not make predictions. We were very careful. We want a serious agreement to be balanced. There'll be a major meeting between Prime Minister Johnson, President Biden, and Prime Minister Scholz, and we'll talk about Iran. I told the IAEA that we are committed to the goals of the IAEA, and France is willing not to make any political pressures on those. We want an agreement rather than no agreement. We know that agreement is not going to solve everything. The Iranian issue will still require to talk about destabilization, about ballistic engine, missiles, and so on. So we have to work on this. Thank you. See you later.
Well, that was Emmanuel Macron fielding a number of different questions from reporters outside the Saint-Eugène cemetery outside of Algiers during his state visit to Algeria. A number of different issues covered here, including the gas situation in France. Macron talking about European solidarity when it comes to finding alternate sources of gas for Europe, and also talking about the troubled history between France and Algeria, saying that you have to fight before you reconcile, and asking for truth and recognition that is necessary in order to move forward. That's the end of our special edition. We'll be back in a few minutes with more news.